And they learn all their lessons at Southbank Centre. They do geography, they do physics, they do maths, and they use all the different things that the Southbank Centre has. You know, it has cafes, it has accounting, it has a whole finance department, it does marketing, it sells things to people, it has a river where you can study physics, it has everything really that children could learn about, starting from that place. And the teachers felt that not being isolated in a classroom, but actually being in an intergenerational circumstance was making the children feel, aha, this is the world, this is the real world. So we're learning, but we're learning it in the world. We weren't training them to be artists. We're not training them to become part of the creative industries, but actually just saying, this is a very exciting public space that is already being paid for by your parents through taxation. Shouldn't it be available to you as well as a learning zone? And you know, that's true of lots of places. So in thinking about how could you challenge how the curriculum is delivered and what is in the curriculum, I'd like to also challenge where the curriculum is being delivered. It's marvellous to think of all these new schools being created and exciting to think that they're going to be much better equipped. But the fact that we no longer have societies where the bread shop's there, the church is there, the school's there, the community centre's there, and we're kind of all mixed up together, really. The fact that we no longer live like that is increasingly ghettoising children from the rest of us. Is there anything we could do about that? Is there any way that we could make the curriculum of learning something which had to engage adults as well as children? And I'm not just talking about adults who know they want to learn things. I'm talking about the vast majority of citizens who don't feel they need to learn any more about children and children's rights. I gave a talk to my own staff the other week about children's rights because I was thinking about arts distribution. We have an incredible creative industry sector in the UK. There's probably no other nation in the whole world that has as many theatres and museums and galleries and outdoor performances, etc. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. And of course, I'm thrilled that's the case. But just think how many of those are actually about children and young people. Really few. And I think this is for this reason, that in our heads, we still think that the right to art starts with those people who can best afford it and are best educated, and then it works its way down. And I could give you a graph that showed you subsidy to that effect. Most subsidy goes into classical music and classical art, and then the least subsidy of all goes into children's theatre or children's art. Now, again, it's for another day, the conversation about that. But, you know, it stemmed from, once upon a time, you could only buy a ticket for a concert if you could prove you were a property owner. It wasn't whether you had the money, you had to prove that you were a sort of a solid citizen. And we're still measuring out the right to art on a sort of basis of those who will understand it the most can have the most, and those who understand it the least, in our opinion, can have some bits, and it'll be nice for them. Now, we're trying to change that language, but even changing it and standing up and being counted to change it produces enormous antagonism, because fundamentally, a lot of people think that's the world they like to live in. And I think that what I was saying to my staff was, supposing you tipped it up and put it the other way around, and you said, right, most subsidy for the arts is going to be spent on children and young people. Because they're the ones who are the next generation, they're the ones who need to learn, they're the ones with the appetite, they're the ones with the mindset that will come at it and take it for what it is. Well, of course, it produces absolute horror in people, because what would you do with the institutions that we've got? What would you do with all of those groups that are subsidised to deliver to adults in the way that they do? It would be such a paradigm shift. People can't sort of contemplate it at the moment. But I think that there'll come a point within the next 100 years when the rights of children and the rights of young people won't be just a tick for consumerism to spend their pocket money on Nike, but actually will have to be a tick on rights to do with the depth of education experience, the depth of artistic encounter, the depth of scientific knowledge. Because unless we think that way, we're still really sort of sending them down the mines. Now, that's a bit melodramatic, but what I mean by that is we're still putting them in a box called, this is the way we want them to behave at the moment. This is the most useful thing for us. And I think children and young people are sussing that and beginning to really rebel. I mean, they're not taking to the streets and rioting, but they are rebelling. I mean, when you say, why would they prefer a bus stop to a school? They probably wouldn't prefer a bus stop to your school, Mick. But in the main, you know, in the bus stop, they can plan escape routes and think about things they'll do when they're allowed out. And I wonder whether the amount of information that they're given about freedom and ideas and responsibility and so on the one hand, is completely counterintuitive to how they're experiencing living in the world at the moment, where they're mainly ignored and they're mainly sidelined, and where adults in the main, except for teachers, don't really speak to them, except unless they're their own children. So my King Wenceslas journey has been to doggedly try to say that the human right to art is something which has got to force us to change how the taxation system works, to distribute it differently, to give people different rights in different ways, in different circumstances, and finally to respect the fact and believe in the fact that it isn't a small group of white people controlling a great tide of blacks, or a small group of educated people controlling a large mass of non-educated people, or a small group of artistically and aesthetically developed people giving, you know, a little bit of the rest to the masses. But actually, we're seeking out a world with real equality. And I don't think that equality is about making it equal for adults, but still grading children and young people as sort of underneath that. I think it's a generational equality that we should be seeking as well. On my dogged journey, I get quite a lot of brickbats thrown my way because people think, well, that's just so politically correct, or, you know, that's anti-art, or that's anti-high quality art, or you're trying to destroy Mozart, you know, all of which is absolutely nonsense. But I didn't know when I set out to do this all these years ago that it would sometimes be quite hard to stand in the light, to stand up on your pedestal and say, you know, this is what I think we should be doing and this is how we should change things.